Yeah, give me okay. So we've begun Shar base of the Nefesh HaHaim, and we're actually in Perak base. And I want to start with the main topic under discussion, and really the thrust of what the Nefesh HaHaim is talking about here is about the meaning of the word bracha, like how we say 100 brachas every day, and we begin Baruch Atah Hashem, and what does it mean, Baruch? And he's proven that Baruch, although in English we say, "Blessed art thou, Lord our God," but what does blessed mean? And we would start probably by throwing out the idea of praised, right? In Hebrew, we use the word shevach b'tehillah, and he proves that that can't be the meaning because you have psukim in the Torah where God will bless your water and your bread, and it can't be that God is going to praise, our bread and water. So it clearly means, and it's from the Rishonim, the Rashba and others, the inyan of bracha is tosefet b'riboy, which I like to use the English word augmentation, and multiplication, like an increase. And so it means more and more. God will bless your bread and water, so then that makes sense. He'll give you plenty of bread and plenty of water. But the question, well, what does that mean though for God? Blessed art thou, O Lord our God. There's going to be more God. What does that mean? There's only one God, and He's perfect. He doesn't need augmentation or increase. So what's it all about? How can we understand the basics of Baruch Atah Hashem? So that's where we're holding really in the Nefesh HaChaim. He's talking about that topic. Omnam inyan habracha lo yidbarach shmo. So what is the context? What is the meaning of giving a bracha to Hashem? So ein hakavana la'atzmus adon yachid baruch hu kaviyachol chalila v'chalila. So it can't be that we're trying to send a bracha, and even if that means augmentation, increase, or whatever, it can't be to atzmuso yizbarach adon yachid baruch hu kaviyachol. So I want to sort of return to very basic Jewish philosophical idea of, I'll say almost tongue in cheek, where is God? We're, as prim Jews, we know that God is here. And, when you kiss your tefillin, your tefillin is a piece of leather, and even the inside of your tefillin is the parchment and ink on parchment. But we have the sense that if it says Yud Ke Vav Ke, on the tefillin, and there's a shin on the batim of the tefillin, and we kiss tzitzis, and we kiss sidurim, and we kiss gemaras, so we have a sense there's something, that worth kissing. There's something we love in divrei kedusha, in tashmishe kedusha, and in a sefer Torah for sure. And Chazal definitely say stuff like that, in the letters of Yud Ke Vav Ke, if you put your finger on it, it's like you're putting your finger on God, so to speak. So that God has an imminent presence really all the way down here, right? Parchment, which is the skin of a cow. So that is for sure part of our gestalt and what we believe. On the other hand, it's obvious to everybody that God is very high in the sky. He's high up in the heavens. And even, an agnostic would acknowledge that. And, God is unknowable. He's really far away. And I found actually that the Kabbalah has been helpful to me in sort of expanding my mind in terms of, how great, how far, how big God is, because, God is just a word. And the Kabbalah offers us, we have 10 spheroids, but then we have the oilamos of what's called Abiyah, the world of, Asiya and Yitzira and Bria and Atzilus. So there's a whole world of divinity that's, we're not even there. We can barely connect to it. But then even above the Oilam Atzilus, there's higher things yet. And there's something called Adam Kadmon. There's, something they call it Ak. And then there's even higher things than that. And then there's something called Or Ein Sof, okay, which in English would just be infinite light. And with all those terminologies, we haven't reached God Himself. He's above any of those terminologies. And the Kabbalah says that. So, if people sort of maybe a
Can I
non-religious
ask
person,
where
yes,
does the Merkava come into that framework?
the Merkava, like the Maisa Merkava, what Yechezkel and Yeshayahu describe, they see cherubs, right? Kruvim and Chayos HaKodesh Va'oifanim, which is a vision, really, of angels. Okay, those are types of angels, right? The Ofanim, the Chayos HaKodesh. And then in the vision of Yechezkel, there's a demus ke'ein adam yoshev ala kisei, right? So and the kisei kavod is associated with olam habriya, right? And then they had some vision of something even higher than that. Let's call it the olam atzilus. And there was demus adam. Okay, so there was something that they're seeing, which maybe has to do with Adam Kadmon or something like that. So it's a hard question that I'm not confident of, but that's what I would throw out just out of hand. Okay, so I'm thinking about Atzmuso Yisbarach, God's unknowable essence, and that how maybe a non-religious person feels that religious people are maybe they're petty or they're arrogant, and that they think that they can capture God, and God is in the prayer book, and these hymns that we say, or these deeds that we do, or beads that somebody counts, deal, that they somehow are like capturing God. And it sounds like a shtus, it sounds like nonsense to a person who's not into like ritual and and religion, though they're, let's say, a believer in the existence of a God who created the universe. But do you really think, like even Barack Obama, do you really think God cares if you eat shellfish? Like, I understand that thought. God is so big and high, he doesn't care if you have shrimp. And Chazal utter that statement. They have almost his very words. Ma ichbas le lekud shabrichu im shachit mi oiref o mi tzavar. Does God really care if you shech the animal from the front of its neck or its back? I mean, so Chazal are also using that sort of sarcasm that God is way bigger than that. So we believe that God gave us the Torah and he commanded us. And so on a certain level, he does care and he'll punish us if we don't do it and so on and so forth. But there's for sure a level of divinity, which is, if you will, beyond good and evil. And ma ichbasle, lo achbatlo, you couldn't care less. You can't affect him at all through your deeds and whether you do mitzvahs or averis. God is just way bigger than all that. And so you have to put the theology together that mitzvahs do matter and he does care and we are having impact. And that's what the Nefesh HaHaim is talking about, really, how to put this picture together. But it's complex. It's not simple. And the idea, sort of the resentment that I'll call him the koifer or the agnostic would feel towards the religion, that you think that you captured God and he's according to your rules and your rules are really important and you can only pray through these words or these towards Jerusalem or whatever it is. We understand sort of their sense that zekatan alav, that's really petty and small on God. He's much bigger than that. So we have to recognize that we're not talking, and even now that we're entering a discussion of Baruch Atah Hashem, we're not talking. Ein hakavana, says the Nefesh HaHaim, ein hakavana la'atzmut adon yachid baruch hu kaviyachol. We're not talking about, I'll use the term, or ein sof, the infinite light, and certainly what's beyond the infinite light, which is just God's unknowable essence, which we could use this term atzmuso, right? God's self or his being. We're not talking about that because we can't talk about that. There's nothing to say and there's nothing to do. So that's not part of our discussion. It's an important part of our theology that we can't talk about that and we can't affect that. And we never will, never did, and never will. Because it stands alone, God unto himself. Before the world is created and after we destroyed, he's all alone in his uniqueness. So we're not talking about that. We are talking about the fact that somewhere along the line, he decided to create the universe. And here we are, and here he is, right? We're here. That's obvious to me that I exist. And it's obvious to me that God exists. So we must somehow know each other. We must be connected because he's here and I'm here. So that gives me sort of permission to relate to him, to talk about him, to talk to him, to give him a bracha. He could give me a bracha. We're both here. And God has an imminent presence. And he told us, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. He spoke to us. The Jewish people particularly have a really great role in this, that he spoke, in the singular, the second person singular. Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. I am your God, to each one of the Jewish people. So there's a personal God that we believe in that does care about us. He's looking out for us. There's Hashgacha Pratis. And so my brachas, Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, are meaningful and they have impact. And what they're going to impact and the augmentation, the Tosefes Beriboy that we're discussing, are the channels of connection between me and God, between God and the world. God, again, his infinite, unknowable self is totally separate, and yet somehow he has connected himself to everything that exists. And so that connection can be augmented, and we could have more divine presence in this world, or we could have less. Right? We're all familiar with the term Hester Panim, where Hashem is sort of hiding himself and he's maybe constricting the pathways of divine influx into the world, so that really, if there were a godometer, if we could measure God and his presence in this world, the godometer would be really low, because there's Hester Panim, and Hashem has seen that people don't want to deal with him, so they turn their back on him, he turns their back on them. We learned about that with the Kruvim, that it's Panim al Panim, or Achor be'Achor. So the godometer changes. There could be a real lot of God here, and you could feel the palpable presence of the Shekhinah on the Beis Hamikdash, and it'll be off the charts of the presence of God, and that will be felt by everybody, and everybody will tremble from the presence of God. And there were times like that in history. Certainly Kabbalah Satorah was really the pinnacle of that. Kriyas Yamsuf was a time like that. The plagues were a time like that. But the existence of the first temple, where the Shekhinah was in the Beis Hamikdash, there was a palpable sense of the presence of God. So that was for real. And when I say it's a measurable change, perhaps I'm exaggerating, but I'm trying to make the point that there really is a change in how much God is connecting his infinite unknowable self to the knowable world. And that is the topic that we are affecting through our brachos. When we say Baruch Atah Hashem, which means Tosefes Veriboy, I'm trying to augment and strengthen and increase God's presence in my world, in the world of Boire Priya Eitz, the one who creates the apples and the oranges. So I'm trying to bring more godliness into the world of apples and oranges, a very physical world. And what the Nefesh HaHaim is teaching us is that change, that augmentation is real. So if I say it's measurable, that's an exaggeration, because we don't really have a godometer. But when the Jewish people are doing well, the Torah says we live in our land and the rains fall in the proper season and that we have plenty of crops. That's measurable presence of God blessing the Jewish people. So that would be, high on the godometer. Steve, did you want to say something?
I think you're talking about it's variable and palpable at times.
Yes.
What can you say about that? Keep going. So he's focusing on the connection, and somehow that should be strengthened or augmented. Which is, so how do you relate that to the morning blessings, for example? About, okay, so today I'm going to be less like a woman, or that type of thing. I feel like a casual male, to quote the clothing stores there.
So as long as you brought up the morning blessings, those are about the morning ritual that a person has in waking up and stretching and getting out of bed and putting his feet on the floor and taking his first steps and washing his face, and all the things that physically we do every morning. as we sort of arise from our slumber, which is, like arising from the dead. And then you mentioned identity of Shelo Asani Goy, Shelo Asani Ovid, Shelo Asani Isha. Um, so you want to, first of all, give praise and appreciation for Hashem providing all the realities. I mean, you're a person who's walking with a cane, and you were walking with the walker, and you weren't walking. You were in all three of those situations within the past 10 months, as you say. So Hamechi Mitzade Gaver is not so abstract. It's it's a reality, right? And of course, God has been with you through that to bring you back to a place where I don't know if you're going to run, but you're going to walk, and that's wonderful. That Baruch Hashem, Hamechi Mitzade Gaver.
So the morning blessings are more thankfulness and appreciation, and to me, it's like putting on your lenses in the morning and retuning into the world you're living in, and who's on top and what's the story. So
I agree with that.
anyway,
but it's also yes.
I will add that ironically, I feel really great for some reason. More than just this week. I mean, I just really been feeling good. I think maybe not mingling with society has helped me tremendously.
The natural processes. Yeah, Shimon.
I'm sorry. Isn't it a sense of like, I don't know if the term is mindfulness. It's like we're always being appreciative and thankful that, Steve says a bracha because he has the carrot to eat. And we wake up in the morning and we're mindful of like every little detail is because we're being given that shevach or that opportunity to live another day and do this and do that and whatever. So isn't it like so that you don't kind of stray away and think, oh, I did all this, I did all that, oh, I did all this, that we're recognizing it's a hakarat tov really, and a todah, hodea, but it makes you mindful that every step you take is kashur.
I would say though that that's sort of like I'll call it a musar perspective on the brachas, or sort of like a human perspective on the brachas. Like, what does it do for us? It keeps us mindful of a reality that everything we have comes to us, through God's beneficence, and it's not koichi v'yotzim yadi, and that's for sure an important message and aspect of the brachas. But the Nefesh HaHaim is going on a different level. I'll call it deeper, and he's talking about the impact of the brachas. So let's say the brachas, or instead of making the brachas, a person said gubbledy gobbledy goo. And he said gubbledy gobbledy goo about his carrot and about his shoes and about his feet and his health and everything else. But and that to him was meaningful, that he's reminding himself that it's God in heaven that did this for me. So that would serve the psychological benefit, the mindfulness benefit of the things, but there's power in the language in Lashon HaKodesh, and there's meaning in this word Baruch, which we're talking about that right now, the power of this augmentation, this increase, that we are doing something. And again, we've already pointed out that we're not doing something to God in his essence, but we are doing something to the divine connection to the world. And so that's impactful, not just on ourselves, but on the world. Yes.
It's not symbolic. If you say, gobbledygook and dippity-doo, it's symbolic of something or a reminder of something. But this is not symbolic. This is like, this is actual.
Yeah, it's actual, it's a reality, so, it's a spiritual reality.
Right. So we're going to use, Lashon Mashmoti, you're going to use real words that have meaning and impact, and not just, wave a flag or jump in the air or say, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, which, as I say, might be representative, but it has no intrinsic meaning in itself. We want the intrinsic meaning.
Since you brought it up, Steve, I want to share something because I only learned it recently, within the past couple of years, about the bracha shelo asani isha. And again, we live in a time of, gender, all sorts of confusion about the issue of gender. It's a little bit political issue. But what's that?
Bud Light,
Bud Light? What's Bud Light?
the whole controversy of Bud Light beer. It's
Oh, okay. I'm not into that.
they use the transgender to advertise Bud Light, and then
Oh, really? I
the
didn't know that.
sales dropped off like you wouldn't
Oh,
believe.
really? The
Yeah.
beer drinkers are not into that woke
Yeah,
mindset.
some woke, millennial who was in charge of the marketing thought it would be a female too, thought it would be a good idea to target a football watching, beer drinking audience with a transgender guy.
Ooh,
Yeah,
ooh,
I mean, that wasn't smart.
No, Ellie Edelman told us that on the business pages they say "Go woke, go broke." Right? It's not good
Right,
business.
right. That's the phrase.
So what I wanted to share about gender transitioning is that it says in the Magen Avram in the Shulchan Aruch that part of the meaning of the bracha of Shelo Asani Isha that we make every day is that as we slept and there was a certain amount of disconnect, or let's say today we're used to charging our phones. So during the night we recharge our neshamas. We plug our neshamas into the charger in the shemayim, and then in the morning, like you take it out of the charger and they put it back in the body. And in that transition, there could be gender dysphoria, whatever they call it, where you could get, a female soul or something like this. And so you have to be thankful every morning that you have your sense of self. We could say it in that way, that you have your sense of maleness, of being a guy and having the mixes, because even that can't be taken for granted. So you joked about it, but there is something to that. Okay, so let's go on in the text of the Nefesh HaHaim. We're talking about the meaning of the bracha, and Hashem is too high for us to affect his essence. Hu merumam me'al kol bracha, aval ha'inyan k'mo shekosev. V'zor, hu shabrichu satim begalia. And this is a really big theme in the Vilna Gaon's writings. These two words, satim begalia. Satim is like satum, enclosed, right? And galia is revealed. So Hashem is, what do they use here? That Hashem is both revealed and hidden. Ki atzmus ein soif baruch hu satim mikol stimin. Ve'ein lechanoiso chas v'shalom b'shum shem klal. Afilu b'shem havaya baruch hu. Afilu b'kutzoi shel yud of the yud kei vav kei. Okay, so this is important because this is an answer to the agnostic who thinks that, religion or Jews are arrogant, that we think we've captured God with the letters Yud Kei Vav Kei. No, we don't think that. Even the Atzmuso Yisbarach, God's essence, is not contained in any name. We can't say anything about him or call him anything. Even the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, and even if you dissect the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei and you just go to the very tippy top of the Yud, and you think, oh yeah, that's God. No, that's not. That is a shame we use. And Hashem has influxed divine energy into that name, and that name has to be treated with respect, etc. We don't even say the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei the way it's written, but it's not God's essence. It's not, right? God's identity is higher than that. It's unknowable and unspeakable. That is Hashem as satim mikol stimin. God is totally enclosed to himself and unknowable, unrevealed, and hidden. It's still, that's not talking about him. So even the highest terminology that we can find, for example, that the Zohar uses, is something called Ein Sof, and that's still a reference, but his chabruso, his connection through his will to the Oilamos. Velazos kinu Ein Sof, and that's why they call him Ein Sof below Ein Reshit, interestingly, right? Why Ein Sof? There's no end. But why don't you say there's no beginning? Ki be'emet mitzad atzmuso yisbarach shmo. Ein lo sof velo reshis. The truth is there's no beginning and there's no end. rak mitzad hasagatenu kol choisav yisbarach, halo kol hasagatenu hu rak reshit, aval ein sof lagia bahasaga lahasig et kochotav yitbarach hanishpaim. So how does he explain it? That we call him Ein Sof and we don't call him Ein Rashis? It's from our perspective that
I always thought Ein Sof.
Yes. Yes.
Maybe this is my own perspective. I know Sof means the end, but I always thought of it more as like Ein Ktseh, like there's no end. So when you have a string, so there's no end to the right and there's no end to the left. Ein Sof in either direction. So
It's
that
infinite.
would include, right, that would
Yes.
include, a potential reshit and a potential sofi.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
maybe that is inclusive of both ends, both.
I also
Sof.
thought of it like that. I didn't really think of Ein Sof as being the opposite of Ein Reshit. I thought of it as Ein Sof on both sides. It's just infinity. But he is looking at it as Ein Sof versus Ein Reshis. And then I guess if I thought of it like that, I would say that Yesh Reshis Kaviyachol, meaning because whatever we can think about or theorize or formulate or try to fathom of God, it's coming from a higher place. It's coming from a Reshis beyond that. But it's Ein Sof. But however it is, I mean, Lamaisa really in Atzmus, so there's no Reshis and there's no Sof. And so we're talking again from our perspective. And I actually have something I'm happy to share. You know that I have what's called the Nefesh HaTzimtzum, which is by the neighbor in Ramat Beit Shemesh, Avinoam Frankel. And he's an Englishman. He's a balabas. He works in high tech, and he's really smart, and he's really assiduous. He's really diligent. He's put out a number of sparim, and so he has a translated version of the Nefesh HaHaim, and he's done really serious scholarly work on it. So it's like a scholarly annotated edition where he's studied the manuscripts. He's talked about everything, this whole story behind its publication and so forth. It's really wonderful. And so he sometimes adds things that are not in the text. And there's a beautiful note here. So he says, it should be noted that an additional reason why the infinite essence of God is referred to as Ein Sof is because the term has the same numerical value, the same gematria as the word or. Okay, so I didn't know that until today when I learned this. Or obviously is Aleph Vav Resh, that's 207. And Ein Sof, I did the math, it's also 207. So there's a certain correspondence in the words Ein Sof, which even though that's not a name of God, it's a description, but it matches the gematria of the word light, or. And so often we use the term or Ein Sof, infinite light. But here we're saying that's equivalent or and Ein Sof. And so the Zohar uses the term Ein Sof very frequently. And he's explaining that one of the reasons they chose that term is because it's equivalent to the gematria of or. So I think that's really interesting. And he goes further. And he says, why God's will, which is that which connects him to the worlds, is likened to light, which has the property of dissemination and connection, and of course, illumination. So light is very, very special, the way it changes things, the difference between darkness and light. And of course, today with modern physics, light being a particle, light being a wave, and all the whole spectrum of light beyond visible light, the gamma rays and the microwaves and the radio waves, etc. So light is a really special, unique thing. And one can sort of relate that to godliness. Because like I talked about the godometer, measuring God, like measuring light waves and how, there's this giant spectrum of light. And without light, if we lived in real darkness, like think of a black hole, right? And I don't know a lot about black holes, just that there's so much gravity in there that it won't allow even the light to escape its gravitational pull, which is just a fascinating idea about, the strength of that vacuum of the black hole. Nothing can escape, not even light. Sort of makes it seem like light is a particle, that it has some mass, the photons or whatever, and they can't escape this intense gravitational field. but the idea of Or Ein Sof, of this endless light, that there is something out there that is mashpia, there's something illuminating, there's something in motion, there's like a mamashus, even though it's hidden. And so it's coming from this satum asher stimin asher bekol stimin, something totally hidden and unrevealed, and yet it's mizgale. There's this giloi that's coming like light to illuminate the world. He continues, the word ratzon, which means will, has the same numerical value as the word shemo, his name, Shin Mem Vav. Shin Mem Vav is 346, and so is ratzon. And therefore, it is only God's will and his connection with the worlds that can be denoted by any form of name. This is in contrast with his essence, the Ein Sof, about which no name is meaningful. So Shmo is connected to Ratzon, but Ein Sof is connected to Or. That is what Rabbi Frankel is adding here. So we're making some progress about trying to find meaning in a bracha, that we are not affecting God's essence, but his connection to the world. And that can be augmented or decreased, and the bracha actively increases it. We do have lots of names for God, 70 names we know. Shakai, Tzvakois, Elokim, Kulam Heim, Rak Mitzad, Yischabruso Yisbarach El Ha'olamois. It's only God's connection to the worlds, Ve'akoichois Me'eis Habriya, and powers that he's created and uses and reveals himself through them from the time of the creation. V'hamidam l'achyoisam l'anhigam kirtzoni Yisbarach Shmo. Ve'heim asher kira'um b'shem, Hishtal Shalut Hasfirot. So this is where the spheroids come in. All these names, again, through the connection between God's unknowable hidden self and the revealed world. V'lefi kol shinoi pratei sidrei hanhagam shmishtalshel v'nimshach lezeh ha'olam im ledin, im lechesed, im lerachamim. Whether Hashem is coming in to judge, to give, or to balance, the synthesis of different, coming with the left hand, coming with the right hand, putting them together, different midos, mishtanim hashemot. So Hashem uses different shemos based on what he is sending and connecting with. Mishtanim hashemos v'akinuyim v'atoarim. Shelechol inyan prati misidrei hanhaga miyuchad lo kinui v'shem prati. Shekei moirim perusham shelatoarim. And each one of these names has a meaning which corresponds to a certain aspect of this connection. Shehei mitzad hakoichos habruim kemo rachum, chanun, perish rachmanut v'chanina al habruim. The example merciful, graceful means exhibiting mercy and grace towards the created beings. So again, it's not that God changes or God has all these names unto himself. All these names relate to how he's relating to us, to his creations. So Chanun Barachum are about these Merachem Alabrios. Ve'afilu Hashem etzem. Ve'afilu Hashem etzem amiyuchad havaya baruch hu yudke vavke. Okay, so you might have thought that's different, says the Nefesh HaHaim, and this is like a little bit of a controversial point. There's dispute about this amongst the Mekubalim. So here's what he says. Lo al atzmuso yizbarach levad anu miyachadim lo. It's still not about God's essence. Ela mitzad hischabruso yizbarach imoy lamois. It's still about perusho, keperusho, hoyahoive v'yiyeh umehave akol. It's about God was, is, and will be, and gives existence to everything that exists. Ratzaloymar, hu yizbarach mischaber b'retzoino. Leha'ilamois, lehavam ulekayamam korega. He, through his will, is connecting up and giving existence to all the worlds that exist, each and every moment, because he wants to. וזה מה שכתוב באריזל בלשונו הקדוש, הובא בהקדמות בעץ חיים, שכל הכינויים והשמויס הם שמויס העצמוס המספשתים בספירוis ein sham. And so he's explaining a line of the Arizal that all the different shemos, and again, there's a lot of shemos, and the Kabbalah speaks a lot about different shemos, but again, none of them are capturing God's unknowable self. They're all about different pathways through which he's making himself known to the created world. So before the created world, there really are no shemos, right? Because having a name, why do you need a name? You need a name to make yourself known to somebody else. Like, you don't know yourself because of your name. You know yourself as yourself. You could be a nameless entity, but you still know yourself. So when God is all alone in his hidden existence, there really are no shemos relevant. All the shemos are really from the Bria, and then they're about his connection and the nature of his connection to the created universe. That's all the shemos. Okay, we're going to stop there, I think. And we've done good introductory work getting towards the meaning of Tosefes V'Riboy and Brachos about augmentation of God's connection to his created world. We give Shimon a bracha for his wife and Refuah Shleima, and all the procedures should go well, the tzimtzur and everything. And everything should go well for everybody. Thanks for being here, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
My pleasure.
Take care.